Anotherway, Erasmus Plus Program, Cooperation for Innovation and the Exchange of Good Practices. KA2 Strategic Partnership for Youth, funded by EU. Number 2019-2-IT03-KA205-016466. Co-funded by the Erasmus Plus Program of the European Union. Mediterranea, Associazione per lo sviluppo locale. This work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 4.0 International License. To view a copy of this license, visit http://creativecommons.org or send a letter to Creative Commons, P.O. Box 1866, Mountain View, CA 94042, USA. Per altra via. Anotherway. An original method by Francesco Piccolo. Module 1. Who? Lessons 5 and 6. Language. You may have seen some ants in a camp or in some documentary on TV. They come and go from their anthill incessantly. We watch them in a row, as if they were cars on a highway. And if some are in the opposite direction, they approach the others so that their antennas seem to touch each other. Very often the anthill is compared to a city or a shantytown because of its intricate shape. An anthill on the left, a shantytown on the right. A very similar shape. The same happens to bees with their hive. For years, scientists have wondered about the meaning of their flying dancing, and it seems they have found some of it. Round dance, waggle dance. In what do we, the human species, resemble the insects described? We create cities and dance too. That would be the most superficial but equally correct answer. We live in communities is the most correct answer. So we too are animals that communicate. Why did I say so? Because the two words, community and communicate, have the same root, and both descend from the Latin communis, which indicates what is not of one individual, but shared with all. The logical consequence is that there can be no community where there is no communication. Let us return to our bees. Like us, they live together in large buildings, built by themselves. We have an army, workers, a leader, sometimes even a queen too. They also communicate with each other, as mentioned above. The circular dance, for example, is used by the explorers when there are flowers full of nectar near the hive. The dance of the abdomen, or 8, instead, is used by the explorer bees when the flowers are farther away than the hive. The straight stretch is traversed in such a way as to form with the vertical of the honeycomb an angle equal to that determined by the position of the booty and the sun with respect to the hive. Let's leave out what happens on a hormonal level, because it seems that men have lost this power to communicate by smell. On the other hand, however, humans have developed an enormous communicative capacity that finds its apex in the language, which is the subject of our lesson. It is said that the Emperor Friedrich II It is said that Emperor Friedrich II of Swabia collected newborn babies and decided to raise them, care for them in absolute silence, with the aim of hearing them speak the original language of mankind. They were fed and washed, but nobody played with them, spoke with them, interacted and communicated with them. Salvin, the author of this chronicle, says that those children spoke neither in Hebrew, nor in Egyptian, nor in any other language. They just died. René Spitz, a Viennese psychoanalyst who emigrated to the USA, conducted a study on abandoned children in orphanages 800 years later using the experimental scientific method. In his writing Hospitalism, 1945, and in the film Grief, A Period in Infancy, 1947, the researcher observed 91 children, abandoned since birth in orphanages, regularly fed but with poor communication, we could say absent. After 3 months of lack of contacts, the children developed a serious apathy, facial inexpressivity, motor retardation, and deterioration of ocular coordination. All the damage was irreversible. Let's not even discuss the cruelty of these experiments. The nodal point that they highlight in their drama, however, is that without communication, without language, the human mind does not develop and the entire organism goes to death. Such a strong affirmation must find confirmation in incontrovertible data, and indeed it does. In our brain there are more areas involved in this function, and a greater part of them are in a hemisphere. Almost all language processes occur in the left hemisphere for most people. Think about how many people you know who write with their left hand. It is the easiest way to distinguish who has the right hemisphere as dominant hemisphere instead of the left, since the brain hemisom, half of the body, correspondence is inverse, i.e. the right hemisphere controls the left hemisphere and vice versa. In detail, we identify the supramarginal gyrus, which extrapolates the meaning of words during the acoustic processing of spoken language. The angular gyrus, a cross-modal hub where information converges from different sensory cortex areas. It is involved in semantic processing, word reading and comprehension, number processing. The primary auditory, an area that, in association with the secondary cortex, allows the distinction of phonemes, linguistic units, from other sounds. Broca's area, responsible for the production of language both at the level of thought and at phonatory and articulatory levels. In practice, it allows us to choose the words that express our thoughts and make those movements of the mouth, tongue, pharynx, larynx that express the sounds related to that word. Let's suppose we see a rose, but we cannot pronounce the word rose. We know what it is. We have the memory of it. But the word is lost, and we would not even know how to produce the sounds rose. Wernicke's area, responsible for understanding written and spoken language. It allows us to use the semantic component of language, which is its very essence. Returning to our rose, we could perfectly pronounce the word pink, but we have no idea what it means, as if we were eternally speaking a foreign language whose sounds we reproduce, but without understanding its meaning. How many times do we sing songs in a language other than ours without having the slightest idea of what the lyrics mean? With regard to semantics, we should add the role played by the visual cortex. It is in this area that the external stimulus is processed as a letter or word, and then transmitted to the semantic recognition areas to be decoded. In relation, instead, to the production of words, i.e., phonation and pronunciation, a decisive role is played by the motor cortex, from where the commands for the phono-articulatory apparatus, speech organs, mouth, tongue, lips, etc., start. In fact, in this area, there is the cortical homunculus, is the brain's physical representation of the human body. It is a neurological map of the anatomical divisions of the body. On the top left is represented the primary motor cortex. At the bottom instead, there is an image of the homunculus. Extremely interesting is what emerged in several experimental studies with blind subjects. Although their visual data processing pathway is interrupted, an activation of the visual cortex and the visual association area was found during the perception of forms through the tactile pathway. This would explain the increase in tactile acuity as the visual association cortex is recruited to integrate the somatosensory cortex processing of tactile stimuli. Moreover, studies carried out with Braille, reading writing code for blind people, reading tasks, verbal production, and verbal memory by functional magnetic resonance imaging, MD et al. 2003, have shown in blind subjects an extended activation of the visual cortex, which is not found in sighted subjects for the same type of task. Therefore, if an area of the brain can function for another different from its usual one, if it can modify itself in its mission, it is evident that the brain has a plastic capacity directly related to its use. The language flywheel of learning is that artifact that not only allows a series of mental processes, but creates the same and goes through that diaphragm that separates the brain from the mind, the organ from its functions. In a certain sense, we can say that language models the brain. Research on native language shows that it is stored in a different place from the others we learn in adulthood. Patients with stroke may lose the ability to express themselves in their native language and keep the second language that helps them to recover later on even the lost language. Returning to the children of Friedrich II, or those of Spitz, we no longer have any doubts about the role that silence and lack of communication in general have played in their decline. Through language, which we might consider a default app to be activated in our brain, the child explores things he cannot experience, expresses his needs rather than acting on them. He learns to think. All the psychological theories on cognitive development from Piaget onwards are focused on learning, which, with good peace of mind of the Swiss author, is essentially language learning, without which there is no access to knowledge, to the symbolic universe that our mind can conceive, to the flow of communication that makes us social beings. What I have just described are the three functions of language: cognitive, symbolic, communicative. In order to exploit its potential, we need to perfect our phonological, sound-related, semantic, meaning-related, pragmatic, context-related, skills during development. I.e., we need to become able to pronounce the word rose, to know that it indicates a flower, and to use the word in the right context. Phonemes and graphemes are the minimum units of a language and fall within the phonological level. At the semantic level, several phonemes spoken or graphemes written form the morpheme, i.e., the minimum unit of meaning. The syntagma, nominal or verbal, is also part of the same level, being the basic unit of syntax, i.e., the set of rules establishing the order of words within a sentence. Many theories have been formulated on the development, the function, the very essence of language by the philosophers of ancient Greece until today, and entire university departments study this complex human artifact, as if language were trying to explain itself. The metalinguistics. However, these theories will not be the subject of this lesson, which aims to provide only those elements useful to understand the value of language in the construction of individual and collective identity. In fact, by communicating their internal states, language communicative function, individuals produce a vision of the world that unites them. They form a community, and always through language they reiterate this vision. Language cognitive function. Moreover, by giving it a symbolic representation, language orders the same reality. For example, the theme of the word logos, which creates order from chaos, is common and across almost all religions. For the Navajo, a native population of North America, in the beginning was the word and the matter, the symbol and the object of the symbol. Three principles: water of all places, black earth, original word. From these, the first man and the first woman, custodians of the primordial symbols, are generated. They are the ones who learn the name of the pre-existing things and, in the language, giving shape to the substance. they release the cosmic order. The Sefer Yetzirah, pre-Kabbalistic text of Jewish tradition, tells that God had 22 primary letters. He drew them, lifted them, weighed them, combined them, and changed them, and with them created the soul of all creation and all that was to be created. 231 doors were opened, one for each combination of the 22 letters that make up the name. And so it turns out that all that is created and all that is said comes from a single name, that of God. Finally, the Gospel, a sacred text for most Europeans, begins by saying, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God." Everything was made through Him, and without Him nothing was made of what exists. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But the sacred texts are only the oldest example. Think of us, our civilization, traditions, the history of our nation, or our family, proverbs, idiomatic expressions, fairy tales, songs, tweets, posts, emails, SMS, WhatsApp, Instagram. Without language, would we still be us? Gregory Bateson, British anthropologist, sociologist, and psychologist, said that we think in stories because we are made of stories, and there can be no history without a memory of facts and without language to tell them. In this lesson, the images are used for educational purposes only, and for the most part are original. Those for which it has been possible to identify the source are mentioned in the image itself. For the others, the author remains available to give credit to any rights holders who request it, using the following address: peraltravia@gmail.com.